Shut up and sit down.
I am a radical libertarian.
And we don't want the...
Shut up and sit down.
I am a radical libertarian.
And we don't want the government to do a damn thing.
The current state of politics is unsustainable, politically, economically.
You deserve better.
It is about supporting, platforming, and assisting the people who are out here actually doing the fight.
You just take an issue that's important to you and do something.
There you go.
You are part of that declaration against tyranny.
Because no one brings tear gas to a gunfight.
This conversation gives me a little more hope for the future.
The one, the only.
Fight for liberty. This is the cherry on top.
This is FSM.
Hello, fighters. Welcome back to Fight for Liberty Live. I'm your host, David Fite, here to get you fired up about the men and women out here making the world a freer place through politics, activism, business, journalism, and more. And we are here on the Free Speech Media Network. If you're watching this on YouTube or any of the older platforms that like to censor us and take things down, go ahead and click the link in the description. This is streaming on Rumble and Odyssey as well. So go on over there. Watch it over there. They pay their creators better. They keep our stuff on there longer. And they're just generally better people to work with. So go on over there. If you're already on Rumble or Odyssey, go ahead and give yourself a little libertarian high five right there. It's like a homeschooler high five, but grown up. Tonight, I am joined by a great man, elected official, stellar activist. But first, we're going to get into our sponsors for the evening. First up, as always, we have Blood of Tyrants Wine, the official spirit of 1776. Now they have a brand new energy tea called Liquid Freedom that will have you refreshed and energized to go out and fight for liberty all day long. Or if you're looking for a nice night in while also slipping on the blood and tears of your enemies and supporting the destruction of the tyrannical state, look no further than Blood of Tyrants Wine. Choose between a Merlot and a Pinot Grigio or both, distributed by activists you know and love. BloodofTyrants.wine is the place to go. Use promo code FSM to get 10% off your first order. Again, that is bloodofTyrants.wine, or click the link in the description. Use promo code FSM. Next up, we have Crafton Business Services. Crafton is dedicated to helping entrepreneurs start, grow, and maintain their businesses by providing a wide variety of products and services to make your business more efficient, manageable, and profitable. Now, Crafton understands how frustrating getting your business off the ground can be, and that's why they've put together their business-in-a-box solutions to turn your idea or side hustle into a fully functioning company in one place for one transparent cost. So for under $1,000, you get your corporate filing, registered agent, logo, business card design, a marketing strategy, and an accounting consultation to get you started off on the right foot. All of that is just $9.99 plus state theft. And if you've already got a business, Crafton can help you grow to new levels with targeted marketing campaigns, affiliate programs, website and social media redesigns, or help make your business less of a headache with streamlined accounting, tax prep, and compliance. All of that is over at crafton.us. Again, use promo code FSM to help out the show and the network. We'd really appreciate it. But without further ado, joining the fight tonight, he is a state senator from the great state of Maine, former senior spokesperson for Young Americans for Liberty, and now the executive director of the Free State Project, the one and only Mr. Eric Brakey. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show.
It's been a long time. Last time I was on, it was back when I was at Yale, and so it's been maybe 3 years.
Yeah. You were one of the earlier. You were one of the first like big names that I got where I was like, oh my god, I have Eric Brakey coming on the show. Like, this is awesome.
Gave you the Brakey bump, and then it's all been big stuff.
There you go. So I normally start off with like kind of a testimonial question, but as we're saying, you've been on and kind of told that story. So I'm more curious, what piqued your interest into the kind of broader world of politics as a possible career path?
No. Well, I never envisioned it as a career path. It just kind of happened. And I guess you get into your mid-30s and you realize, wow, you really have been doing this for over a decade now. So I guess it is a career. So For me, I was just always kind of taking things kind of one step at a time. And when I got involved kind of as an activist, kind of in the New York City liberty movement in the Tea Party days, 2011, right after college, I, Ron Paul activism led to a job with the Ron Paul campaign. I said, okay, I'll do this for a year and I'll try to make a difference. And then we made such a big difference. We took over the whole state party. And I realized, okay, I guess I'm not allowed to leave. I've got to keep doing this for a little while. And I heard Rand Paul was going to run for president in 4 years. So I said, well, maybe I'll do it until then. And I'll try to just do everything I can to position to try to help support Rand Paul become president. Obviously, that didn't work out in the end, but I did become a state senator in the process and pass a bunch of good laws. If there's such a thing as a good law, good laws to protect people's liberties, not to take them away. Ran for state senate twice, won, then said, all right, well, I ran for you. Then next, people in the liberty movement back in 2018 were looking for, the Rand Paul campaign had kind of not gotten the traction that we had all hoped for. And I kind of felt like there was a need for some visible big campaigns in the liberty movement for people to rally around. So I ran for U.S. Senate, won the Republican nomination. That didn't work out. Ran for Congress 2 years later. That didn't work out. Went to Yale, said, all right, I can make a difference here, helping to elect more kind of liberty state legislators around the country. Like I had been, I'd seen kind of what a difference you can make when you're actually in a state legislature. And, but got frustrated watching the tyranny going on back home. So went back, took back my state Senate seat from the Democrats, but I got back into the state legislature and realized there is a whole crop of new liberty lovers that are coming up. And I kind of felt like, okay, I've done my, I feel like I've done what I can do over the course of 10 years for kind of my state, and time to pass the torch to others. And the Free State Project was looking for a new executive director. It seemed like a very intriguing opportunity. And of course, I'd been an admirer of the work and jealous of the accomplishments that were taking place for liberty in New Hampshire. So it's a great opportunity to come on board and take the fight in a new role.
Hell yeah. I remember seeing the announcement that you were the one that got the job, and I was like, fuck yeah. That's like I was genuinely, because I'm friends with quite a few people in the Free State Project, and when that job opened up, there were plenty of conversations and like group chats and whatnot about like, who the hell are they even gonna get to fill that job? And then it was like, oh, Brakey, okay. Sure, just steal somebody from a different state, that works.
Well, the goal is to get libertarians to move to New Hampshire, and I guess a very good way to get a libertarian to move to New Hampshire is to offer them a job. So they're getting me, it really has been amazing as I've kind of come on board, and I'm kind of getting involved a lot more with the community. People have been very welcoming and very pumped about kind of this next wave of the Free State Project that we're building now. Of course, Porcupine Freedom Festival is next week. I know that we won't have you there, but hopefully we'll have some of your audience joining us, and it's going to be a great one.
Hell yeah. So are you in New Hampshire now, or are you still transitioning over?
I'm still transitioning. Though I did just have an offer accepted on a home in Dover, New Hampshire. So we're kind of going through the process of financing right now, and hopefully that'll close by the end of June, and I'll start moving in. But my Senate term isn't done until the end of the year. We're not really doing any work right now, but there might be some committees that meet in the off session I'd like to see through the work on. So I probably won't formally move and declare a change of residence until the end of the year.
That makes sense. You're still going to owe your constituents. It's valid. Dover's a really nice area, though. I'm a fan.
Yeah, it's nice. It's like an hour away from everything. An hour from Manchester, hour from Boston, an hour from Portland, Maine. So it's kind of like a nice cross section of anywhere you want to get to.
Yeah, that is the beauty of the Northeast. I feel sorry for when I talk to like my Texan friends or something like that. It's like, oh yeah, I drive 7 hours to go see my friend who's also on the same state committee as me, where we just get to kind of go all over. So give everybody just kind of the elevator pitch of why New Hampshire, what's the Free State Project?
Yeah, so for any who aren't familiar, the Free State Project is it's a mass migration movement of libertarians, and it's built on a recognition that, you know, as libertarians, there are in fact millions of us across the country, but you wouldn't necessarily know it because we are dispersed. We might be within our various communities across the country. We might be, 1 to 5%, right? And as far as in political terms, that's a very dismissible minority of voters. And culturally, it's hard to have a big impact culturally when you're kind of such a dispersed minority. And so the idea is it's a concentration strategy. It's saying, well, we may be a diaspora spread across the country where our rights are trampled upon and the tyrants don't care what we have to say. But if we were to concentrate in one place, we could start to have a real impact on the local culture and the local politics. And New Hampshire is, of course, a great fit for that because it's already a state with a strong libertarian culture. Its motto is "Live Free or Die." It's you can't get more libertarian than that. And this has been going on for about 20 years now. Thousands of people have moved to New Hampshire. Libertarians have been elected, primarily running as Republicans in the state legislature. Libertarians now account for about a quarter of the state House of Representatives, and have been passing all kinds of great liberty policies as far as like eliminating and cutting taxes more. There's no income tax. There's no sales tax. Real school choice has been passed with education freedom accounts where money follows the child. So putting control back in the hands of families over state bureaucrats. And the New Hampshire House of Representatives, this was something I was particularly proud to see, became the first lower chamber in the country to pass Defend the Guard legislation. So New Hampshire is on a path. The Senate didn't pass it this go around, but sometimes these things take a few times up to bat. But New Hampshire is on a path now to calling home their National Guard troops from wars that have not been properly declared by Congress. And so I think that, for those of us who come out of the Ron Paul wing of the liberty movement, there's been a big emphasis always on the foreign policy and trying to, how do we stop the war machine, the particularly the unconstitutional war machine? There are constitutional frameworks in place for how our country is supposed to go to war so that decision makers can be held accountable by the electorate when those decisions are made poorly. And that whole process has been circumvented by Congress just doesn't vote anymore. They just let the executive branch decide. And it's usually not even the elected member of the executive branch, the president, as we saw with Donald Trump, kind of whatever you think about him, love him or hate him. In moments where he did try to pull the war machine back, the unelected apparatus underneath him actively fought him and lied to him and did everything to avoid accountability from anyone in elected office. And so what Defend the Guard does is recognizes that our National Guard troops account for nearly 50% of all troops on the ground in the wars in the Middle East over the last 20 years. And if states stood up and said, you don't follow the Constitution in how you send our troops overseas, you will not get access anymore to our state National Guardsmen. It's really a way that you can use the nullification strategy to force Congress to do their job. And I'm excited that New Hampshire is one of the states leading the way on that. And it's because
of beautiful. Yeah, wouldn't that be beautiful if Congress actually did their job? That would be beautiful.
It's the least we should expect from them.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Defend the Guard, and like as a concept, it's such a simple bill in my mind. We talk about a lot of kind of crazier out there ideas, especially as libertarians, like myself as an anarchist. A lot of times we're like way over here on the like Overton window of the conversation, where Defend the Guard is literally just follow the Constitution. That's all we want. We just want the Constitution. And only on this one simple thing. It's only one branch of the military. It's only the one that the states actually have the power over. It doesn't help. It's just such it's a small win, but it's an easy win to like sell people on. And I've had so much success talking to people about Defend the Guard specifically when they're they're very, you know, patriotic, pro-military. They kind of get turned off by just the idea of anything that's anti-war because they think that we hate the troops. And it's like, no, defend the guard is aptly named because we're trying to defend the troops. Like, this is a pro-military bill, and it's sellable to both sides so well. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, and it's right. I mean, it certainly is anti-war in a sense, in that it would stop certain wars, but it's really pro-Constitution, right? And it's so many of our combat veterans who've come home from these wars who are the ones who are leading the charge for it. So nobody's going to call them a pinko commie, right? These are some of the most all-American, like rock-ribbed conservative, you know, lovers of the Constitution you'll find. So I think it is very important, and I think this is kind of one of Ron Paul's great contributions to this country, is reigniting the anti-war movement on the right. You know, of course, under the George W. Bush era, I remember if you criticized the wars, you were a pinko commie, right? And if you were a conservative, you just didn't see that on the right. But Ron really reignited that, and I think that the Defend the Guard movement and the success that it's having is a result of that. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. I was one of those people during the Bush administration. I kind of missed the Ron Paul days for the most part. I was like 14, I think, when he ran the second time. So it was like I was kind of paying attention. I knew the name, but I didn't actually see enough of his stuff to get hooked in it. I had to wait another 4 years till Gary Johnson to really get pulled out of that. But I was like full blown like patriot nationalist, like, you know, the best offense or the best defense is a good offense. You know, we got to fight them over there so we don't fight them here. All of the taglines, I believed all of it. So,
you know, we are the most propagandized people in the history of the world. And I believed all of that stuff myself when I was in high school under the Bush regime. And, you know, on the one hand, I could kick myself and be embarrassed about that period of time. But, you know, more... But instead, I just try to have grace for people who are still kind of stuck in that paradigm, because, you know, we were there at one point, and the people in charge of this government are very effective liars.
Right. Yeah, I've always found it. This is totally off topic, but it's cool. I've always found it very interesting how quick we are to, like, when we learn just humans in general, let alone libertarians, like when we learn something, to just not be able to understand how people cannot have learned that yet. It's like, well, it was obvious to me, but, you know, sometimes it's, you know, we're 25, 30, 40, whatever. We just now learned something, and then we still have no grace for the people 10 years younger than us who have so much less experience. I've always found that kind of an interesting conundrum.
You know, when I was in high school, you know, I wasn't the first libertarian in my family. My older brother Matt was a big Ron Paul supporter in 2008. I didn't really get on board for a couple of years after that, and he would mock me, and he would like he was not nice about it. Right? That didn't make me change my mind sooner. In fact, it made me dig my heels in and refuse to listen to him. So I think that, one, it's just good for our own souls to extend grace to people and understand, you know, they're on their life's journey, and we've all got to find our way on our own time. But also, it's not really an effective strategy to persuade anyone by just like deriding them and mocking them and telling them that they're wrong. Maybe if it's on Twitter and you're trying to like persuade the people who are like onlookers, but the person you're calling an idiot is not going to have their mind and their heart open to you.
Yeah. I will also just mention on that point that if you're 7+ tweets into an argument with somebody, and, you know, you have less than 10,000 followers and they have less than 10,000 followers, no one's reading that. You're not messaging to the onlookers. If you look at your like impressions, it's going to be like 7 to 12 views. And that's people that just like happen to scroll by. You know, nobody's reading through like 15, 20 tweet long threads to see how good your argument is. It's not happening. If you're going after bigger accounts and getting the attention of them and being able to do that, that's a whole different story. But 250 follower accounts arguing is not doing anything for anybody.
And you know what's better than winning arguments on Twitter?
What's that?
Going out and getting Liberty legislators elected or doing something more productive that actually moves the needle.
Yeah. Amen to that. Speaking of productive things, you guys, like you said, you got Porcfest coming up this coming week. Tell everybody what it's about and who you're most excited to see there.
Yeah, so the Porcupine Freedom Festival, this is going to be the 21st, so it's been going on 21 years now. And this is going to be a great year. Our theme is Vote with Your Feet. Of course, that's what the whole Free State movement is all about. If you haven't been winning in your state by voting with your ballot, then vote with your feet and come to the Liberty homeland of New Hampshire. And at Porcfest, at least for a week, you can get a little taste of what being in the Liberty homeland is like, and being in community with people who share your values is like. And you could have that year round, but you can come and get a taste of it for a week. And so come for a week, stay for a lifetime, perhaps. But this year, we're going to have great speakers. Spike Cohen is joining us. It's going to be his first Porcupine Freedom Festival. We're looking forward to hearing from him, and actually got some fun projects I'm working with him there. Ron Paul is going to be, for the very first time, is going to be addressing the Porcupine Freedom Festival. Now, he's not physically traveling there like everyone else is. We give Ron Paul a pass. Everyone else we expect to physically travel there. But he's going to be doing a virtual address, and there'll be an opportunity for people to ask questions. Well, I'm going to be asking the questions, but I'm going to be taking suggestions from people. By the way, if anyone in your audience has a question for Ron Paul, they can throw suggestions. I'm going to be going through some of the best suggestions we get. But one thing I really am excited about. I mean, I talk with folks who've been coming to Porcfest for years, and I'm asking them, what do you get excited for? I was talking with a good friend of mine, Alex, and she was telling me how, she used to come to Porcfest. She just kind of loved coming to kind of a great big libertarian party and loved like the party aspect of it, people doing substances and stuff like that, so if that's what people are into, that stuff does go on. But as she's gotten older and she's married and she's got kids now, she says what she really loves is that there's so much, there are activities for families now more than ever, because Porcfest has evolved and changed as the community has grown and evolved and changed. And now we have a lot more families than ever. There's still the parties. There's still, in one corner of Porcfest, there's the Body Freedom Village where people are doing, people who want to, they're doing nude activities right in one corner, but on the far other corner, we've got, like a family zone, and we're doing things, we call it Porcupines, where the activities for non-adults, from the little kids to teenagers. I'm particularly excited, for the little kids. I'm going to be reading the Tuttle Twins and the Creature from Jekyll Island, because we got to get the kids to know early the dangers of the Federal Reserve. But what I'm really looking forward to for the first time, I'm going to be doing for kids 10 to 17, a mock legislature. And we're going to, kids are going to be able to form political parties, and they're going to, someone's going to run for Speaker of the House. They're going to have a legislative agenda. We're going to take a bill all the way through the process of introducing a bill and taking it through the whole legislative process through committees and public hearings to a vote of the legislature. And our governor for this mock legislature is going to be Spike Cohen. So he's going to swear the kids into office, and he's going to decide whether to veto their bill or not. So it's a fun kind of hands-on activity. It's fun, but it's also educational, right? And we're training the kids how to take over their state legislature, so that when they're old enough, in New Hampshire, you only have to be 18 to run for the House of Representatives. When they're old enough, they can take over the state legislature and defeat the state. So we're training them young.
Yeah, you guys have enough kids there at Porcfest. If all of them get elected, that's over half the state legislature.
Oh yeah. There's 400 seats in the New Hampshire State House. It's like huge legislative body. So, and it's not hard to get elected. I mean, it's like, New Hampshire state with somewhere between 1.3, 1.5 million people, and there's 400 House seats. So it's like almost like every neighborhood has its own House seat. So It's great.
I remember when I was first up there for the Tulsi Gabbard campaign, I met a bunch of state house reps, as one does in New Hampshire. It's hard to not meet one if you leave your house. But coming from New York, our house districts are, I want to say, like 70,000 people, something like that. Like, they're fairly huge districts. They're 2 to 3 cities, or like smaller cities, but like 2 to 3 cities plus the space in between. Like,
sounds like about the size of my Senate district in Maine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I've literally met Chuck Schumer more times than I've met my state. We call it assembly here, but my state assemblyman. Like, it's so then to go to New Hampshire and just be like, oh my God, you're like an important person. You're an elected official, and then so are you, and so are you, and then I finally got told, like, yeah, no, that's like, it's actually pretty easy. We have a gigantic legislature, and this is going to happen a lot.
Got a real citizen legislature.
Yeah,
which is how you get radical things passed, like defend the guard.
Yeah,
it's not a bunch of just like risk averse politicians who are just like fearful for their jobs. It's like activists who want to actually make a difference and not just keep a seat warm.
Mm-hmm. And it's the most representative republic in the world. It's the like fewest constituents to a representative from like anybody in the world, which I find very cool. But yeah, back to the Porcfest thing. I was just talking on LP Happy Hour on Friday night. We were talking about Porcfest, and we were talking about the kind of family and the kids aspect about it, and just how many kids there were there last year, and how much they were hustling and just running around selling shit and doing stuff. And you had those kids that were selling a map of the campground on one side and then the daily schedule printed on the other side. They were just running around with stacks of it, selling those for like $1 a piece. Genius business ideas from these like 7 to 10-year-olds. It was crazy.
Yeah, this year, I mean, there's always so many different ideas that they have themselves on stuff to sell. And of course, that's a big part of Porcfest, is kind of the free commerce and that kind of open marketplace. I will say this year I'm kind of excited too. On top of everything else, we always have a problem with, like, people love the Porcfest t-shirts, but we always kind of, you worry if you buy too many and then we lose money if they don't all sell. And I said, why don't we just let the kids sell the t-shirts? Like, let them mark it up a little bit, keep a profit on it. So I'm fairly confident. We've got 300 limited supply of Porcfest 21 t-shirts. And I'm confident with the kids as the salespeople for them, and they get to keep a nice, tidy profit on it. I'm hopeful we're going to sell out this year.
That's genius. I love that. I'm just going to clarify. I endorse kids selling things, not selling kids. Just for the record, fucking for legal reasons. But yeah, that's a really good idea. I love that. It's really cool to teach kids, because I saw a little bit of, kind of overly generous, like you are, to like a kid who's trying to sell you something. But it was, in my mind, one of the more kind of real markets that a kid could experience. If you're going around selling something for your school or whatever as a fundraiser, very few people tell you no. You don't actually get to keep much of the profit. You don't have any of the supply to worry about or anything like that. Where this, people were telling you no. People were like, no, I'm not going to buy that. I don't have money. I'm not hungry right now. I already have the schedule on my phone, whatever. I feel like it was a more like blunt and real entry into the free market than you normally have if you're kind of like trying to sell something as a 7-year-old. And again, like actually good business ideas because of it.
Yeah. I mean, I always think about, my wife always tells me experience she had when she was in school in New Hampshire. She grew up in New Hampshire, and she started like a school store, and she was making a ton of money, like selling like bagels and stuff like that. But who came down on her was like I guess the cafeteria was like unionized or had some company or something. they came and they put her out of business. She wasn't allowed to compete with them because, it's
Of course, it was a labor union.
Yeah, it's like a heavy arm of like government employees coming down on a kid who's just trying to engage in commerce and learning and educate something educational in it, right? You can rest assured at the Porcupine Freedom Festival, we're not shutting kids down from selling maps or T-shirts or food or whatever they want to sell, or anyone else for that matter, right? As long as you're not hurting people or taking their stuff.
Amen to that. And I would be remiss if I didn't shout out my boy Ben Weir and some of the emo caucus stuff that's going on at Porcfest, because they've got a whole slate of things. They're doing an emo prom, they're doing Cut My Life into Pizza's pizza party. There's a new metal night and an emo night rave. They're doing the Roaring 20s happy hour every day from 2:20 to 4:20, where they're going to be serving drinks. And they're all themed, fun, quirky drinks too. They've got like a spiked lemonade, like Spike Cohen on it, and it'll be a great time. So go check those guys out for sure if you go. I think my favorite part about Porcfest is, even though y'all do a great job putting on the actual event itself, there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on that other people are putting on, and full hubs just doing a whole slew of a schedule.
Festivals within festivals.
Yeah, it's confusing. There's a lot. It's a little bit overwhelming when you first look at the schedule, but it's so much fun to just kind of wander around. There's like 3 different parties going on. You have some amazing person speaking over there. You've got another great person speaking over there. What are some of the, because I didn't think I was going to be able to make it. To save myself the FOMO, have been trying to not look too much into the schedule. What are some of the other like orgs that are doing hubs that you know about?
Oh, I'm trying to think. I was just going through a lot of the schedule myself, looking it over kind of the other day, and I was a little overwhelmed by just kind of how people have truth be told, like a lot of it, we've been encouraging people like, hey, get your hubs up and going and kind of get your events scheduled. And, libertarians, we always wait till the last minute. Well, just in the last couple days, they've all just been popping up online. And it's amazing kind of how many events are going on. I should say I haven't thrown out the website yet. The website is porcfest.com, and that's pork with a C, not a K. And there you can go, you can check out the schedule. You can see all the official events, all the hub events. There's everything. There's always things like from, I know events I've been to in the past. There's like people doing like improv. There's people doing you talk about the emo caucus and the emo parties. There's people running their different shops and businesses. There's people who are doing games. There's knitting groups. There's people doing different talks with different speakers that they're bringing in. So there's a plethora of different things to do outside of the main stage official FSP events. So certainly, if you just go to the official FSP events, you're gonna have a great time. But you're only getting that one taste of what Porcfest is. So you definitely want to explore the hubs.
Yeah, it's like the libertarian South by Southwest, where it's like half the convention is outside of the convention.
It's decentralized.
Yeah, as it should be.
Spontaneous order.
Yeah. Could you imagine if they tried to make it all like authoritarian, like you have to like only have? Oh my God, that would be. Hurting libertarians would be rough on that one.
Yeah, I mean, as I do recall, I do think that the hub model is something that really kind of evolved over time, and I think that earlier on there was a lot more just emphasis on just the official things, and people were just coming and camping. But this is something that kind of, I think, organically evolved and has really become a great feature of Porcfest.
Hell yeah. Speaking of the, acting out libertarianism through this, talking a little bit about the pork rangers and the first aid and how we kind of handle first responders in an anarchist way during Porcfest.
Yeah. Well, so yes, we've got many different volunteer teams at Porcfest. The most visible, of course, are our pork rangers and free aid. Free aid is, hey, kid falls over, scrapes their knee. Free aid is there, to render kind of first aid, and or something more serious happens. We've got, this is a team that's led by a trained physician, but it's all volunteers. And pork rangers are there too if there's an incident that arises. It's volunteers that are there to kind of help de-escalate things and provide some just basic security. Now, I will say I'm getting them this year. We're getting the pork rangers, these pork ranger. I kind of wanted to get them like little badges, but that would be a little too status. So anyway, we're getting them these cool like little pork ranger pins they can have to designate them as a pork ranger. But we wanted to, we were playing with different designs, and I thought, what about like originally I was thinking like, like Texas Rangers, and people are like, no, that's far too status. So we just got like a little cool porcupine thing. Anyway, you'll be able to, anyway, we do have volunteers on hand if there's anything that arises where first aid is needed or some kind of security is needed. Thankfully, things have been pretty good, and those situations. I mean, the occasional scrape or bruise does happen, of course. I mean, one year someone did do a backflip into a fire pit. That was not a good good thing. They needed help a little bit more beyond free aid. But that anyway, don't do a backflip into a fire pit. I mean, if you do that, that's kind of on you.
There's a personal responsibility aspect to all of this too. Which I think is lived out very well at Porcfest. It's one of the things that makes it really cool to me is, most people are carrying out their trash and, cleaning up after themselves, helping the tent site next to them. It's just a better community than you see most places. It reminds me of like Boy Scout camporees, where everybody's just kind of like, even if it's a different troop, they're Boy Scouts in your family, and so you just treat them like that. It's a really good. Sorry.
Yeah, I know, and I will add one thing. This year we really are investing in the facilities. Last year we had record turnout because Bobby Kennedy was speaking, and we got more turnout than we ever had before, and we ran into issues where there wasn't enough water and there wasn't enough porta potties, and anyway, there were a lot of complaints last year about some of that, so we've kind of doubled down. I know this isn't like the sexiest thing to talk about, but
that's an important thing to mention.
We've like doubled the amount of porta potties. We're bringing in like trucks that are shower trucks and bathroom trucks, and we're even looking to get like an extra like water truck, like a water tanker to be on hand just in case anything happens and things run out of water. So we've got non-potable water that can be used for people flushing their toilets of their RVs and washing their hands and all those sorts of things. So I know that's not the most fun thing to talk about, but considering it was one of the most consistent complaints I heard about from last year, we've really kind of we're working to make sure that we are covered in terms of our facilities.
That's awesome. Because that's definitely a complaint I've heard a few times too.
So if you were scared away by lack of water last year, then no, we are on top of it.
Come on back.
Come on back. Yes.
Yeah. I want to go back to the free aid real quick, just because I ended up volunteering just like 1 or 2 short shifts last year. And I used to be, a certified first responder and, first aid, and I was a waterfront director. So that's why I had all of those different certifications. But I had some EMT friends. So I've kind of ridden along in ambulances and things like that before when I was in my teens. And that tent for free aid is better stocked than some like ERs that I've seen before. Like they have all of the medicine that you need, all of the like splints, and it's ridiculously well stocked for, because we're there for 10 days. Like there's a lot of things that can go wrong, and
Porcupine is always prepared.
Yeah. It just kind of, it blew me away. And especially to your point, it's all volunteers. It's all supplied by donations, and it's completely just a community driven thing that is better than some ambulance corps in some, especially in like small towns like where it's located.
Yeah. Well, thank you for volunteering. And I will say, for anyone who might be coming for the first time, volunteering is a great way to just kind of like jump in and get to know people. Obviously, like, obviously a lot of our volunteers are people who've come, many times over, but if it's your first time and you like feel like you don't know anyone, sign up for the pork rangers or for free aid or for registration or for facilities. I mean, we got a lot of great volunteer teams. It's a great way to, you start helping out at registration, checking people in, you're going to make friends very quickly. And then you're going to see those people, all around. And now wherever you go, you got friends to connect with. So it's a great way to hop in and get involved.
100%. That is genuinely the reason I did it last year. Somebody made that exact pitch to me, and I was like, okay, yeah. I had nothing really to do the first 2 days that I was there, and I knew like 15 people that were on camp. Most of my friends only came for like the last few days, and I was like, yeah, okay, let's go meet some people. And I got to make friends with most of the pork rangers, who are all like really cool. I think 7 of them are named Josh, and that's cool. It makes it easy. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of the way that Porcfest just shows people, if you're somebody who goes, libertarianism is kind of neat. I kind of like what you guys talk about on here. I mostly watch for the activist people. Your politics are a little iffy. I don't know if it'll work in practice. Go to Porcfest and see how libertarianism actually works in practice. Kind of walled off from the state for 10 days. Cops literally aren't even like really allowed in.
And thankfully, I think we've got a good relationship with the local government in Lancaster, so we've never had any problems with them. And I will say, of course, it is like a taste of what it's like to be in community with the Free Staters in New Hampshire. But at the same time, while Porcfest comes only once a year, the community aspects of the Free State movement continue all year round. There is not a single day in New Hampshire that goes by that I don't think there is at least 1 or 2 or 3 like libertarian events going on somewhere in the state. We've got like 4 different clubhouses across the state where people are regularly holding events. Whether that's bringing in, whether that's just kind of like community potlucks or bringing in speakers. There's a plethora of activity in New Hampshire. I felt like the thought that occurred to me when my first month on the ground in New Hampshire as executive director, going to all of these events, I just thought, man, it's like the Ron Paul campaign ended in 2012, but New Hampshire never got the memo, and they just kept going. So if anyone in your audience, they come to Porcfest, that's great, but they're always welcome to come and just visit New Hampshire anytime. There are events going on all year round. And it just shoot us a line at fsp.org and let us know you're coming. We'll connect you with the community, connect you with events that are going on. And, we're always trying to sell more Liberty people on joining us in New Hampshire.
Yeah, hell yeah. It's an amazing community of people. I saw a post on the interwebs just a day or 2 ago of somebody up there who, unfortunately, their wife was in a car accident the other day. But he posted about it, and accident happened, wife called husband immediately, and the quick 5-minute drive across town to go get her, there was already 2 other Free Staters who had stopped and were helping like unload the car and everything.
I heard about that when it happened.
Yeah, the density of people that are in the same mission as you, and people that and are actually part of a real community, is something that I just don't think we experience much anymore.
And that part is hard to explain. I mean, I can tell you about, hey, look, we got school choice passed, or hey, look, what happened to defend the guard. I can talk about tangible things happen in the legislature. That's easy to talk about. But what's hard to explain is the vibrancy of the community itself outside of politics. I mean, just to be in community with people who, aren't going to like don't want to sick the government on you if you live your life in a way they don't agree with, right? Or you spend your money in a way that they think that they could spend it better on something else, right? If they could have the government tax man come and take it from you, right? So the community is amazing. It's unlike anything I think you'll ever find in the country, and it's because of that concentration there. I mean, I was having a conversation on his show with Andrew Heaton. Andrew Heaton, is the political orphanage. Anyway, funny guy and kind of liberty adjacent. I don't think he'd call himself a libertarian, but anyway, he was asking me about this, and he's like, so like he asked me like, don't you guys like get sick and tired of just sitting around like talking about Murray Rothbard all the time? Like he imagine people imagine.
No, we do not.
Well, some people never get sick of it. I'd get sick of it after a while. But I mean, the great thing is, right, maybe that's I think our idea of like how libertarians like are in community with each other is based on like how people are online, because that's like how we experience generally being in community with other libertarians is through the internet. But when you're actually in a physical location together and you're building physical community together, it's like, all right, once we all agree that we're all libertarians and we have these kind of shared libertarian values, like we don't need to talk about it all the time, right? It's like, hey, do you like playing Dungeons and Dragons? Let's have a D&D group. Or like, hey, do you like, people have like rucking groups, hiking groups, or knit and bitch groups, like whatever people's interests are outside of just libertarianism, right? There's a liberty group for that. And if there isn't, I guarantee you that there are enough people who share your interests that you could build whatever group you wanted, and just be involved in whatever your interests are, with people who share your values.
Yeah, I feel like the liberty movement a lot of times feels more like a workplace community than an actual community. We're normally talking about work. We're connected because we kind of have to be we're like on a campaign together or a nonprofit or something, and that's how we usually meet people. Even if it's at an event, you're still a lot of maybe not everybody, but I'm sure you can definitely relate to this. You're turned on when you're at these events, is like, you're in politician mode or like executive director mode or whatever. And so it kind of, it just gets into that rut of like a work friend who very little about outside of work, and you just talk about how much the operating system sucks or something like that. Where New Hampshire, like, it's an actual community that, like you're saying, it goes beyond that, just that we work together. It's that we actually like are friends, just genuine friends who have these other hobbies and hang out. And I don't go to New Hampshire for any reason without hanging out with at least a couple of free staters and either going out drinking or playing Magic or smoking and playing guitar with like throw a little band together of people, because there's always enough people to get 4 or 5 instruments together and the jam session go. It's just an awesome community. I know I haven't made the jump and moved there, but I can't pitch it hard enough. Like, it's a great place.
What's holding you back?
At the moment,
I know you
family,
got
family stuff. But honestly, it's there's one other kind of liberty mecca that's got my attention a little bit harder, and I think I'm going back to where you just moved out of, in Austin.
Okay.
But which is a nice like number 2 for the same kind of purpose. There's a lot of liberty people there. A lot of people are moving there, so that's kind of
that's fair. I did enjoy my time in Austin while I was down there, and there's certainly with Young Americans for Liberty there, and there's some other groups there. There's kind of a nice hub. I did like I did kind of like how Austin was kind of like this liberal city in a conservative state, where there's kind of this balance of, you get the culture of a liberal city, but because that liberal city hasn't managed to take over the state politically, you also don't have to pay any income tax, and your gun rights are protected. So, there's a balance there, but boy, when those liberal cities become so big that they take over the state politically, I mean, we're experiencing that in Maine right now, where Portland has just become so politically dominant that it's just like, you live in rural parts of Maine, and it's like, why are my gun rights being suppressed now? Why are my taxes like through the roof? It's Anyway,
Yeah.
not to bitch about Maine, the other state that I love, which is not going in a great direction right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I do love that kind of balance in Austin because, like, the opposite of where I grew up in a small town in New York. So it was the worst of both worlds. You had no culture at all. And but also ridiculously high taxes, no gun rights, terrible schools, all of the terrible things that come with a blue state. But I got none of the fun that would come with, being in a blue area
or something like that.
Yeah. But yeah, Austin's really a nice middle ground. And I think the Liberty movement has a nice ability. I know this is like the opposite of what you want me to be talking about here, but like the Liberty movement has a nice ability to kind of scoop up a lot of the newcomers into Austin. You've got a lot of the kind of right-leaning Californians and Washington, Oregon are all moving to Texas, usually to Austin, and they're not going there to make Texas blue per se. They ran away from blue for a reason, and they went to Texas for a reason. If they can be shown that there is a third option, that it's not either vote blue because Texas blue is better than California blue, or like these crazy Texas Republicans, that there's a third ideology there, even if they're not buying into the party yet, that there's an in-between ideology that people hold, and that they are probably, if you're somebody that moved from California to Austin, you're probably one of us, because all of the reasons to want to move there have to do like are core principles of ours. Maybe not 100%, but like it's a good marketplace.
Well, I do know I did see certainly when I was down in Texas, you heard this all the time. People very fearful of folks moving from California and bringing California values and turning Texas blue. But I think that polling of those folks kind of revealed that in fact folks moving to Texas from California were more conservative on average than the average Texan, right? And so there is something about like people they're leaving California behind, and they chose Texas because of that Texas brand and the idea of Texas, right? Frankly, I don't, Texas has this reputation of being the state with all the freedom and everything. I don't think that Texas actually lives up to that reputation. They only just recently got constitutional carry. I mean, New Hampshire and Maine were like a decade ahead of them in that regard. But I do think it speaks to something that is kind of going on around the country, kind of in a general sense of, particularly like in the since COVID, of this just kind of this migration, people relocating, people realizing it really does matter the state that they live in terms of if they're going to have basic freedoms or what have you. I think I saw sadly in Maine does not have like the brand of being a maybe it's like our governor, our Democrat governor was one of the hard lockdowners. And like, we got a lot of people who moved to Maine, but they tended to be people like moving from New York who were like, well, I love the COVID tyranny. I just want a little bit more room to breathe. And so politically it has kind of not worked out well for Maine, at least if you love liberty, in terms of the way that shift is going. But then you see like the people moving to Florida, and of course a lot of people have moved to New Hampshire. Kind of, I know we've been losing a lot of great people from Maine to New Hampshire because of the difference in the level of freedom there, particularly when policies were enacted in Maine to like remove all religious and philosophical exemptions for vaccination and for school kids, right? People are voting with their feet more than ever. And I will say, Texas, maybe Austin is a good place to be for kind of if you're a libertarian and you like that liberty community. But Texas overall, I guess people are moving there to live in a conservative state. Florida, people are moving there to live in a conservative state. But the only real libertarian state is New Hampshire. And I think that what you see in the Freedom in the 50 States Index that was recently released, I think kind of demonstrates that. So like Florida and Texas rank very high on economic freedom, but pretty low when it comes to personal freedom. Texas is like close to the bottom of the barrel when it comes to personal freedom. Florida is like somewhere in the middle, but New Hampshire ranks very high for both personal freedom and economic freedom. We just got to get marijuana legalized.
I was about to say that.
I know
I was
that's
like, legalize my weed, and then I'll move.
Well, here's the thing: is that it is decriminalized. First of all, I know that's not as great, right? I did a lot of work
in
on
a way that's
marijuana.
almost better, but from like an anarchist perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the kind of legalization regime that you have. Like some states do it very poorly. And there's a concern, right? Right now there's a fight in the New Hampshire legislature where the much more libertarian House of Representatives has passed a legalization bill many times over that would be very market driven, bottom up. And the Senate just passed legalization for the very first time, but it's the version that the Republican governor, Chris Sununu, wants, which is like a franchise model where it's like basically like public-private partnerships where you're basically giving licensing monopolies to private entities. And it's just like the worst way to do it. And so it's
That's how we did it here too.
Yeah, well, Maine, I will say,
New York and Illinois going that way makes sense. New Hampshire, you would expect better.
Yeah, Maine, I think, is one of the best. And I maybe I'm a little biased because I wrote the laws for Maine, but at least for the medical program. But
nice.
But it's just like there's no licensing caps. It's driven by small businesses. You don't have like one firm that comes in and gobbles up all the licenses and monopolizes the industry. The taxes are fairly low, at least for medical adult use. They need to work out some of the taxes there a little bit more, but
still on the lower end of the spectrum as far as price goes. You're like kind of on par with like Michigan and some of the other kind of recreational states that are doing it better, and product wise too. Like to your point, when it's a bottom up market, the way that the market actually works, the product turns out pretty fucking good. It's better than Illinois or New York's weed, in my opinion. I can rant about that as a consumer. That your laws worked well. I was just up there like a month and a half ago. It was
awesome.
Great.
Well, and of course, if you're in New Hampshire, you're not too far in any direction, right? It's legal in Canada, legal in Vermont, legal in Massachusetts, legal in Maine, right?
Yeah.
And
it's not that wide of a state.
So I'm right there in Dover. I'm like literally right across the border from Maine. So I don't admit to consuming any substances on a live podcast or anything like that. But if I did, I'm just right across the border.
There you go. It's not quite my favorite state. I think that's still Oregon, and I don't actually know much about the back end, like on the production side of it. I haven't researched their laws, but on the consumer side of it, it was the most like just chill. It was basically just they allowed smoke shops to start selling weed. So it's none of this, show your ID at the door, kind of, 2-door security room kind of stuff that a lot of states have to have. I don't think Maine has that either, but you still have to ID at the door.
You did ID at the door for adult use, but they just, thanks to the work of my good friend, Representative David Boyer, they're getting rid of that. So now it's going to be on par with the medical program where you just show your ID when you're like at the register, right? Yeah. So anyway,
how most normal things work.
Right. You're right. It's you try to walk into a liquor store. Sorry, you gotta, anyway, it's there's still progress to be made there. I would say the medical program in Maine, I think is much better in terms of the way the laws are constructed, and the adult use program, the adult use program is still fairly new in the grand scheme of things. I mean, the medical program has been building. Maine was the second state in the country to pass have medical cannabis. So it's a program that's been evolving and growing for a long time. Though we did a big overhaul of the laws back in 2018 when I was chairing the Health and Human Services Committee. And anyway, it's been like a revolution since.
Hell yeah. And you guys accept out-of-state medical cards too, which is something not very many states do.
Yeah, we have
'cause I know my
yeah.
I was,
Go on.
I was just gonna say my New York friends will go up to Maine because it's about half the price to get medical marijuana in Maine than it is New York. And you know their medical cards work up there. Which
Yeah,
is
yeah, we have
interesting.
Maine has reciprocity with other states, and I mean, I'll tell you, like before we changed the laws, I mean, here are some of the things that we changed. So it used to be in it used to be in Maine, you had to, if you're a medical patient, you had you had 2 copies of your med card, right? And you'd hold on to one and you'd leave another copy with the caregiver or the dispensary who was your designated caregiver or dispensary. And then you were like married to that one place. That was the only place you were allowed to shop. So we got rid of that. I mean, I always thought that was crazy. We got rid of that. We opened it up so that caregivers who are kind of like the small businesses in the field, we made it legal for them to operate storefronts, and now there are stores all over the place. Whereas it used to be they weren't allowed to operate storefronts; only dispensaries were able to, and there were 8 dispensary licenses in the state. And one firm had come in and gobbled up 4 of the licenses. So it was a very anyway, so things have changed quite a bit, and there were a number of other things. I guess I won't I don't need to go in depth on everything, but it's become a very small business driven industry and with a lot of good competition.
Well, I hope when they choose to legalize it in New Hampshire, they tap you for writing some of that legislation, because I think you did a very fine job.
I'm glad you've enjoyed some of our. It's our biggest agricultural product in Maine now. So I'm glad you
love that.
Come to appreciate it.
That's awesome, and that proves a point that libertarians have been saying for a long time: is that will be the case. You know, if we legalize it, that's just a huge industry that we can just make so much extra money off of in some of these states that it's hard to do some of the other agriculture year round. You can go read almost all year round. Like you guys obviously have the same winters we do. There's a few months there that you can't do it outside, but so you were talking about Defend the Guard, and I know you guys you had some win as far as school choice goes in the legislature too, like within the last year or two, right?
Yeah, I mean, New Hampshire's really been leading the way with, I guess, this model. A lot of other places called education savings accounts. They call it education freedom accounts in New Hampshire. I guess just a little extra spin on it, but it's basically if you're a parent and you got your kids in the local public school and you decide that you don't think that public school is the right fit for your kid, you can take your kid out and you would get a chunk of the state taxpayer dollars that would then follow your kid. And then you could use those dollars at your discretion for a variety of different things. You could use it to pay for tuition at another public school or at a private school, or you could use it for homeschooling expenses. So it is funny. Like I saw some of the defenders of the government schools attacking the program, saying, they're looking up where the money is being spent. They're like, look at how much of this money is being spent on Amazon.com. Like people are wasting all this money. Like, what are they buying on Amazon.com? It's like books,
school supplies. Yeah.
It's like, did you know that Amazon.com was originally like the world's like biggest bookstore? It's in some ways, I mean, obviously there are libertarians who could quibble about things and say, there's the only real solution is to just abolish like government involvement in schooling totally. Okay, well, I don't think that that's a practical reality in the near term. But anywhere
nor is it a winning message.
Yeah. But anything where we can break up these kind of like centralized bureaucratic monopolies over these systems. I mean, I think it's great for education. I mean, frankly, I'd love to see us do similar things in healthcare with like the Medicaid program, rather than like funneling all this money into a top-down bureaucracy. Like just give people the money into a health savings account that let them direct kind of their healthcare. But I think that this is a great principle that can be applied in so many different places where We have just become accustomed to top-down government bureaucracies, but kind of being in charge. Just turn it on its head and make the parents or the patients, or make the end consumer of the product, like make them the actual consumer, give them the economic power to make decisions, and then you're going to have systems that cater to what they want and what they need, rather than what politicians and bureaucracies want and need.
Yeah. I love that it applies to homeschooling expenses too, because not every state that has like fairly solid school choice laws, there's that one little caveat that they're missing, and that's really cool. Because I mean, I was homeschooled, and so I'm a big supporter of that.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, we do oftentimes on this get some pushback in the homeschooling community because they are concerned that where government money follows, strings will come attached. And I think that's a fair concern. I think you try to write the laws in such a way that you protect against that. But at the end of the day, you always make it optional, right? And you don't have to take the government money if you don't want to. But so far, I think it's worked out fairly well, and it's led to kind of a really growing marketplace for education where you don't typically see one, because we're all stuck in these government models. So I mean, I was just taking a tour recently of basically it's like a homeschool co-op. It's basically just like a school, but it's just run by free staters and parents and the kinds of anyway, it's very impressive. Awesome. Kind of seeing what people can build once there's an actual availability for a marketplace in education.
That's really cool. I always wanted to live close to something like that. We did like a weekly co-op that we did, 8 weeks per semester, so it was like 16 weeks of the year, but that's not a whole lot of time. Like 16 days out of the year I was at a co-op, the rest of it was at home. So I always wanted to live closer to something like that, and it's really encouraging to see. We have something similar about an hour from me here in New York that was kind of started by one of our state committee members of the LP here and is growing into something really cool. And it's awesome to see that become, as homeschooling is becoming more popular, people are realizing that maybe I don't know all the things and could probably get some help from some parents and, extra interaction with other kids. And that's really the only issue I had with homeschooling, was that there was just a little bit of that socializing lacking. And sometimes, my mom just didn't necessarily know. Like there was a point where I became a little bit smarter than my mom on certain subjects, and that was 8th and 9th grade in like history and some of those other topics that you don't really need to know as an adult, and a nerd like me like deep dove into. So having, other nerd adults to talk to about history, and actually like the guy that introduced me to Ron Paul was from the homeschool co-op that I went to, and it's like kind of having those other people around was really like the one thing that I felt like I was missing growing up. And so it's awesome to hear that the next generation is going to have that.
All the worst fears of the status of what happens when you allow homeschooling. You're going to have people teaching subversive ideas and introducing them to people like Ron Paul and ideas of liberty. Man,
I will say that guy was an unironic socialist and used to wear like a hammer and sickle t-shirt to co-op often, and would start issues amongst the parents for that, because obviously most of the homeschool parents are like super hardcore Republican, conservative, like right-wing people, the ones that I grew up around. And then there's this one like socialist dude, but he was kind of like a libertarian socialist-esque, and voted for Ron Paul. So he introduced me to a lot of the stuff that I know. And one of the reasons why I message to the left as much as I do, because I know that there's actually some hope in those people with the hammer and sickle t-shirts.
we gotta try to pull people out of the matrix wherever we can.
True that. So what else legislatively do you guys have going on?
Well, So in New Hampshire, I haven't been I haven't personally been following the New Hampshire legislature too closely because I'm still transitioning out of the Maine legislature. But
Fair enough.
but obviously, I mean the big fight has been on the cannabis cannabis legalization. I'm not sure what the latest updates on that are lately. But no, we're excited. I'm excited. I'm just personally excited to finally kind of get on the ground, moved into New Hampshire. We're planning things out for kind of the next year of the Free State Project and all kinds of ways that we can kind of message and reach the libertarian diaspora around the country and let them know what's happening in New Hampshire. I do say I do want to pick in particular on the state of New York because in the Freedom in the 50 States Index, New York was ranked dead last. Going to prove that the Free State is better than the Empire State. And I personally, I want to start a petition to get the Statue of Liberty to relocate because she doesn't seem like she really fits in there anymore. She'd do a lot better outside of Portsmouth, I think. So,
to be fair, technically, we don't actually own her.
Yeah, it's what
she's in New Jersey, technically.
Yeah, well, it's almost as bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost as bad politically, and then you have to deal with the smell and the people of New Jersey. So,
Chris Christie anyway.
I will, as a New Yorker, I will second that though. I think it would look good up there.
Yeah, yeah. So, how long do we go for? We go for another 20 minutes. How did you like the LP National Convention?
Oh, that was a great time. Honestly, I had a really good time. Obviously, almost no votes went my way the entire convention. There was, I think, one person that I actually voted for that won. But I'm a libertarian. I'm used to that. So it happens. But I was there working with Lars Mapstead's campaign. And so obviously that didn't go our way, but I got to finally meet in person my entire team that I had been working with for a little over a month at the time. And I was their volunteer coordinator. So I was on the phone with 100 different people around the country in the weeks leading up to it, and then actually got to meet all of those people. Got to see a bunch of my old friends that I've known for a while. Harrison Kemp was there, and like some of my original people that brought me into the Liberty movement and kind of got me plugged in. Obviously, I hung out with Spike and Tasha a lot, and yeah, it was a great time. I wish we hadn't stretched the voting out until almost 2:00 in the morning, but
yeah, I guess people were saying after that was kind of like an intentional, like dilatory tactic to try to run out the clock to get people to leave, so maybe affect the outcome of the vote.
So what I understand it as is that the quote unquote anti-Mises faction thought that the Mises caucus was trying to run out the clock so that we wouldn't get to the at-large elections, and then those seats would just be filled by the people who had been elected, which was overwhelmingly Mises at the time, because it would have just been the 4 officers and then the region reps who would get to fill those seats, and so it would just be 5 more Mises seats guaranteed. And so the anti-Mises people pressed the issue of making sure that we actually voted for that, which ended up kind of stretching everything out longer because they were just adamantly fighting any motion to adjourn. And the Mises caucus ended up winning all 5 at-large seats anyway. Which is the part that bugs me the most, because I understand the mindset, but then you lost, so why did you do that to us?
Do you think the presidential race might have turned out differently if it had happened at a different time?
No. Honestly, when the votes came down to what they were, I wasn't expecting it to go the way that it did, but watching it happen, by the second round I knew that it was Chase, The only thing that would have changed it is if most of our people for Lars went to Termont instead of, we basically split half and half Termont Chase, I think, based on how the numbers kind of looked, which kept Chase in second. If we had joined if we had gone all the way Termont, it would have been that kind of middle ground compromise candidate coming out of third place, like, which is honestly what normally happens, is either somebody wins in the first round or the third place person kind of shimmies their way to the top by being the compromise. So I was expecting it to be either Mike or Lars based on that. And then when we got fourth in round one, I knew that it was over for us. And that if it was going to be the compromise candidate, it would be Mike and not us. But Chase winning it did kind of surprise me. But given how the delegate split went, I don't think that there was any other outcome possible.
Yeah. I've met Chase a few times. He's always been very nice and cordial to me. I don't have any issue with him. I know that there's been a lot of I don't think I'm voting for the LP ticket this year, but that's not a reflection on him personally. But I don't know too much about him other than kind of all the hubbub lately. Like, what's your take on him? I know this is you interviewing me and I'm asking the questions now, but
that's fine. So honestly, Chase and I've known him since he ran for Congress in 2020. I had him on the show early on, and we kind of remained acquaintances for a little while and kind of built up into friends to where last year at Porcfest, I hung out with him for most of the chunk of the couple days that he was there. Kind of almost was his body man for a little bit in the kind of earlier days of his campaign, and I had nothing better to do. And so I'm a fan of his. He's been like a really solid anti-war and anti-police activist in Atlanta. He's been on kind of the front lines of the like Stop Cop City movement down there, which is one of the biggest like anti-state or like anti-government movements going on in Atlanta right now. And he definitely used to be more of kind of a culture war-y type person, but he's toned that down a lot over the last couple of years. And I think a mixture between him running a national campaign for the first time instead of a campaign in Atlanta, and some of the team and just kind of him growing as a person. This time he's been campaigning on a culture war ceasefire, that like this, we need to not be talking about how to use government to push our various cultural agendas and just stop the government first, and then we can settle our cultural differences when we aren't living in a horribly tyrannical, borderline fascist country. And so I'm liking a lot of the messaging that I've seen out of his campaign so far. The timing of like everybody mad that he's gay and then him getting nominated 2 days before Pride Month starts definitely wasn't great. Like that timing just was gonna be screwy. But I think, once that's over, it makes sense. We're running the first openly gay presidential candidate to ever be running a national campaign. In Pride Month, or a national general campaign, I should say. Because there have been primary candidates in the past, but no one's ever been like a top 3 or 4 in a general election openly gay. And I'm sure there were plenty of closeted ones, but that's beside the point. But so, yeah, it makes sense for him to be doing like pride messaging during Pride Month and reaching the people that he can with that. But I think we'll see kind of a return to the campaign at large at the end of the month, and a lot of the people that are mad at the moment, I think, will come around when they realize that anti-war is the issue that made him a libertarian, it's the issue that made him an activist, it's the issue that made him a politician, And so all these people who have for the last 8 years been crying that libertarians should talk about anti-war and not culture war stuff, I think are going to come around and hopefully stop crying about culture war stuff while he's trying to talk about anti-war stuff.
Yeah, I certainly do see sometimes. Sometimes it does feel like the folks who complain about the culture war are also some of the folks who are most engaged in the culture war.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, certainly the more he emphasizes kind of the anti-war message, that's something that hopefully unifies the liberty movement. Though I do see, it does disappoint me sometimes that I do see certain segments of the liberty movement that seem to buy into the propaganda on like the war in Russia, the war with Russia and Ukraine, and sometimes I wonder, I get some of these people, and some of these are, I mean, I don't want to say prominent names, but they're people like who run organizations in the liberty movement who like, I don't know. It just seems like they just like read the same talking points as Hillary Clinton and Lindsey Graham when it comes to Russia, Ukraine. And I just wonder what they're doing here. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it has always been a little bit wild to me. I have a few friends in the LP, which, for lack of a better term, are just objectively blue-pilled. Like they had they're libertarians, so they've had the conversation with Morpheus. They understand what's going on and actively are choosing to just be like, yeah, but I'm still just gonna believe most of what I'm told because it's just a simpler, easier, happier life. And I'll still be a libertarian and fight for, things and give money and do the thing and vote L, but it's just easier to stay bought into the Matrix.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's one thing, it's one level to like buy into the general idea of like, hey, non-aggression principle, we shouldn't hurt people and don't take their stuff, and people should be able to live their lives however they want. But then it's another thing to like not really ingest and grok like just how evil the empire is.
Yeah.
Right. And to have this to buy into this idea of, oh, we're exporting democracy around the world, and this was a totally unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, and our government was just over there minding its own business, not doing anything wrong. Right. Just like we were in the lead up to the 9/11 attacks, we were just minding our own business, not doing anything, and we were just attacked out of the blue for no reason whatsoever. Right. It's like, this is always the narrative, like, but of course, like, we are the world empire, or at least, I mean, now we're subjects of it. We're told that we're citizens, but we're subjects of it. I will say, I mean, I don't know. I saw in the intro video to your show, I saw one of the people.
I knew that's who you were talking about. Yeah, he bothers me, but to the point, like, he's also one of the most hardworking activists I've ever gotten to work with, and has been doing it for such a long time that his resume is honestly solid. And some of the work that he did in Tennessee and the work that he does in SFL is just like a lot of good comes from him. So I have him muted on Twitter so I don't argue with him. And
I don't know. I will say it just makes me not want to like associate with SFL. That like, I don't know.
That's valid. I will say, don't hold that against them. You can hold it against like Project Liberal, because
I mean, I will say
like his thing, but SFL is a big group.
Yeah, I mean, I will say SFL, at least as I've always thought, does great international work. I don't want to pick on SFL, but it's just like, I don't know. It just seems to me like this is the one thing that should unite libertarians, is opposition to the global empire. And anyway, I didn't intend to have a conversation about this guy.
You're good. I will say, just to kind of go the other, I'm not going to name names on this one either, because I'm going to get my head chopped off. There are other people in the liberty movement who will say things publicly about how they just completely support Putin and everything he does, and think he's a great, wonderful stand-up guy, which also isn't helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I feel like I'm pretty immersed in that side of or that kind of counter the U.S. empire kind of sphere of things. I haven't heard anyone, at least no one of like any prominence, who has said Vladimir Putin's a great leader. And I mean, other than like maybe in the context of like accepting that all world leaders are terrible monsters. Maybe some monsters are not as bad as others. Like Putin is a monster, but they're all monsters, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyway, but you certainly can go so far in the other direction that you start to excuse the behavior of the enemies of the U.S. empire just because they are the enemies of the U.S. empire.
Yeah. And I mean, to your point earlier about us being like the most propagandized people, the Russians are not super far behind us. And it's easy to try to pivot so hard away from one propaganda that you end up just getting kind of scooped up by another one.
Yeah.
We got to make sure that we're finding the middle ground. And
there are many
listening to
competing
independent
narratives out there for our mind, and
Yeah.
we need to not get sucked into any of them, and need to try to retain some objectivity and always ask ourselves, if I believe that, how does it benefit them? Right?
Yeah.
The person who's telling me that, how does it benefit them if I believe their narrative? I mean, of course,
Good point.
but there is also the degree to like, some things that are said, like, I don't know. It does bother me, on the one side of things, people, anything you say that is counter to kind of the U.S. narrative on Russia, Ukraine is you're repeating Russian Putin talking points, right? But it's like, I don't know, just because he says something doesn't mean it's not true, right? Just because he says like, hey, NATO's been expanding and is on our doorstep and we're very worried about that. It's like, well, all right, that's a legitimate worry. I think we'd be worried about it if the roles were reversed.
Yeah, I've been getting that for, at least 4 years now with the either Putin or Assad apologist from being on the Tulsi camp. The McCarthyism is coming back real strong in America.
Oh yeah,
and it's definitely has a few of the libertarians hooked, which is sad to see. Before I let you go, I want to give you one more chance to pitch why people should move to New Hampshire, why they should come to Porcfest, and how they can find out information about all of the above.
All right. You want to come to New Hampshire because you want to live free. This is the freest state in the country, and it's free because of the mass migration of libertarians coming to this state and building a liberty homeland. You can keep living in the authoritarian 49 if you want to, but you could also come and live in the freest state in America, which is growing freer by the day. I still live, before I moved to New Hampshire officially, I still live in a state where liberty is dying a death by 1,000 cuts. But in New Hampshire, it is the state that is dying to death by 1,000 cuts, because this is what happens when you get thousands of libertarians working together in community, pursuing their own ways to fight against statism and to fight for liberty. The state is losing ground and liberty is gaining ground. And can you say that about your own state? I don't know of a single state in the country where I think you can say that about anywhere else except for New Hampshire. So come join us at the Porcupine Freedom Festival. Come taste the revolution, vote with your feet, see what it's like for a week, and then maybe you might just stay with us for a lifetime and make your life here in the Liberty homeland. It's kind of like Zionism, but for liberty, and Zionism, but for libertarians. You don't have to be any ethnicity. You don't have to be any religion. We're not kicking people off their land. We're not going to the United Nations and asking them to do it for us. We're just going there. We're moving. We're building community and building a liberty homeland. And you are welcome. And if you are not coming tomorrow, if you're not like ready to make the move, this year, that's fine. When things get to a breaking point in your state, like they did for so many during COVID, and you realize you can't take it anymore, that you, for the sake of yourself and your family, you need to go somewhere where your liberties will be respected. We're building that community there in New Hampshire, and you are welcome when you are ready. And you can find out more at fsp.org. And you can follow me on Twitter at Senator Brakey.
Hell yeah. You heard the man. Go check out all the links below to grab your tickets for Porcfest, learn more about the great work of the Free State Project and all that they're doing up in New Hampshire. And before you go, don't forget, as always, to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this around to all your friends so that they can know about how awesome Mr. Brakey here is and all the good work that he's doing. We'll be back here next week. We've got 3 shows back to back, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We've got Dave Casey from David versus Goliath. Then Kristen Alexander, vice chair of the LP of Indiana, one of the strongest parties we have in the country. And then we have Erica Kolinich, who's running for governor of West Virginia on the LP ticket. So we've got an awesome, awesome week coming up next week. Don't miss out. Eric, thanks so much for coming on. This is awesome.
Good talking with you, David. Let's not let it be 3 years before we talk again.
Hell yeah. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Catch you back here next time. And until then, keep up the fight.